Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. My name is Cathy O'Hara, and I'm one of the publishing directors here at the Lancet Group based in London in the UK. I'd like to warmly welcome you all to this session on pathways to publication in oncology. Thank you for joining us. I'd like to start with giving you an overview of our agenda today. Firstly, I'll give a brief overview of our publishing pathways and the range of opportunities we have at the Lancet Group to find the best home for your research. Then we'll move to a panel discussion where I'll be joined by 4 very experienced Lancet editors: Vanya Wisdom, Ali Landman, Julie Stacey, and Thaisa Villa. Together, we'll guide you through our options for publication, take a closer look at our decision-making processes, and share our tips for successful submission and publication. We'll finish today with a Q&A session to give you the opportunity to put your questions to our editors. Firstly, some housekeeping. You're welcome to submit your questions throughout the webinar. Just use the Q&A box on the dashboard. Also on the webinar dashboard, you will see a related resources box, which will have useful links to the Lancet.com, to some of the things that we talk about today. To turn on closed captions and translations, please click the CC icon in the top right-hand corner of the webinar dashboard and select your preferred language. Please note, however, that captions and translations are automatically generated and may not be entirely accurate. You'll receive a link by email to the on-demand version of this webinar after the webinar. And finally, at the end of the webinar, it would be great if you could complete our 30-second feedback survey. Your feedback tips really do help us improve our future webinar offerings. So let's make a start. I'm going to give you an overview of our pathways to publication in oncology for the Lancet Group of journals. So, whether you choose to submit your manuscript to the Lancet or one of our specialty, discovery science, or regional health journals, there are several pathways to publication for oncology content. Of course, the Lancet journals can't publish every manuscript we receive, but we can provide guidance to help you find the very best home for your oncology research via our article transfer service, which is available within the Lancet Group and with other journals published by Elsevier, as illustrated in this diagram. You can explore our pathways to public illustration online by clicking on the Pathways to Publication link in the Related Resources section of this webinar. My editorial colleagues are all subject matter experts with medical or scientific backgrounds. Each manuscript submitted to a Lancet journal is treated very individually, but most oncology research manuscripts follow a very similar path within the Lancet Group, from submission through editorial to peer review, as detailed on this slide. As subject matter experts, our editors carefully read every manuscript that is submitted and will decide the next appropriate step, whether that be to reject, advance, or recommend transfer. As part of our internal peer review process, which complements and expands upon external peer review, Lancet editors work very closely with one another, regularly reviewing and commenting on manuscripts under consideration across the portfolio. When our editors decide to send manuscripts for external peer review, they identify and invite external reviewers with relevant expertise from around the world, ensuring their complementary knowledge and skills provides an additional layer of rigorous scrutiny. Some articles are also sent to a statistical reviewer. These external experts make suggestions for improvements, critique the analysis, and provide recommendations to the authors, as well as our editors. Once the peer reviewers' comments are all in hand, our editors again review internally and discuss the comments together. And the journal's editorial team then decides whether to take a manuscript forward towards publication. The editor-in-chief is the final arbiter of all decisions on each of the Lancet journals. For example, the decision to take a paper to peer review, the decision to publish or reject in light of the peer reviewer's remarks, journal scope and commissioning, consideration of appeals, general inquiries, and editorial priorities at any given time. So now on to the article transfer service that I mentioned. If your oncology manuscript is rejected by the journal to which you first submitted, there may be an opportunity for it to be considered by another journal in the Lancet Group or relevant Elsevier journal. Internal transfers can occur both pre-peer review and post-peer review. Transfers to other journals only take place with the author's approval. If you agree to have your manuscript transferred to another journal, you will not need to reformat your manuscript. And within the Lancet Group, the original peer review comments are also transferred to help avoid additional delays or duplicate effort amongst our peer reviewers. As an oncology author, you have several options amongst journals within the Lancet Group, including the Lancet Weekly, which publishes novel research that advances or illuminates medical science or practice, as well as several specialty journals which are dedicated to oncology, including, as you see here, the Lancet Oncology, or that cover oncology research as it relates to specific areas of research and practice, from the Lancet Hematology to the Lancet Gastroenterology and Hepatology, the Lancet Respiratory Medicine, the Lancet Obstetrics, Gynecology and Women's Health. We also have the Lancet Diabetes and Endocrinology, the Lancet Neurology, and the Lancet Psychiatry, as well as the Lancet Child and Adolescent Health, the Lancet Healthy Longevity, and the Lancet Primary Care. So covering the full life course and playing a crucial role for their communities, especially related to early detection, symptom management, and ongoing support for people living with and beyond cancer. The Lancet Public Health and the Lancet Global Health and the Lancet Digital Health all consider oncology research as well, focusing on the health of populations within as well as transcending specific geographical areas, and that explore how technology can help improve cancer care delivery and promote better health and well-being globally. If you happen to have content that focuses on specific geographical areas, consider submitting to one of our regional health titles. These open access journals publish high quality, evidence based research focused on 6 regions of the world: the Americas, Europe, Southeast Asia, Western Pacific, and launching very soon, Africa and Eastern Mediterranean. The journals reinforce the fact that the interdependence and collaboration are fundamental to solving the problems that we face as a global society. If your work is translational or basic research, e-biomedicine may be a good fit for your manuscript, whereas e-clinical medicine publishes emerging or early research in clinical medicine, including oncology. So there we have it. As an oncology researcher, you can see that the Lancet Group offers many different options for publishing your manuscript, and our editors will work with you to find the very best home for your paper. Should your manuscript progress within the Lancet Group, you will be supported by our collaborative international team of more than 200 scholarly publishing professionals, including expert editors, technical editors, production editors, illustrators and proofreaders, marketing, communication and multimedia specialists, publishers, operations and product managers, and editorial assistants, all of us dedicated to supporting you and your work to advance health worldwide. So now, having given you a brief overview to what we do and how we do it at the Lancet, I'm really delighted to introduce my colleagues to you. We have, firstly, Vanya Wisdom, who's Senior Executive Editor at the Lancet, and in fact our oncology ambassador for the group. Vanya is based in the UK. Ali Landman is the acting editor-in-chief for the Lancet Child and Adolescent Health and is also a former deputy editor of the Lancet Oncology. Ali is also in the UK. Thaisa Biller, editor-in-chief at the Lancet Regional Health and Americas, is based in Brazil. And finally, I'd like to introduce Julie Stacey, who's the editor-in-chief of eBiomedicine and based in the UK. Thank you for joining me. So now we move to the panel part of our discussions today. And I'd like to start by putting the question to you. We've looked at the variety of journals available for people who want to submit their article, but with such a broad range of journals that publish oncology content, how should authors approach deciding where to submit their research? And Vanya, maybe you'd like to make a start on that one.
Thanks, Cassie. That's a very good question. Our portfolio is indeed quite large, and we have over 20 journals, I think, able to accommodate cancer-related research. I would say the first point to consider is the scope of the journal, and you can find the information for authors in all journals will have detailed information on there. But quite importantly, scope of the journal refers to the area of the discipline of interest that journal is covering, and also refers to the type of the level of research, the evidence that the journal is interested in. So, for instance, we might be talking about translational research or clinical research, and the scope will vary also in relation to that. And as a practical example, for instance, if you want to submit a paper that includes outcomes in people above the age of 25, this, for instance, would be out of scope for a journal like the Lancet Child and Adolescents. Or if you have a paper where you're studying benign tumors, this would be outside the scope for the Lancet Oncology Journal. If your work is translational and includes animal models, in vitro experiments, then eBiomedicine might be the only journal in the group that reports in vitro data. So at the end of the day, you want to find an alignment between the discipline, the research objective, and the study design of your manuscript and the journal. So finally, I think another important point to consider is the type of publishing model that the journals can offer. The Lancet Group covers both open access and hybrid models, depending on authors' preference and funding requirements. And again, this is detailed and within each the information for authors on the page of each of the journals in the group.
Thank you, Vanya, for that really comprehensive answer to the question. I'm wondering, Ali, was there anything that you'd like to add there?
Yes, thanks, Kathy, and thanks, Vanya, for leading us off on that. I just wanted to add that if you have questions about scope and fit for a journal, that you're welcome to email the editor or the editorial inbox, and those email addresses are on the About page for each journal. But you should note that different editors and journals are going to have different policies about taking those types of questions. So, for example, I know that the Lancet Oncology and the Lancet Child and Adolescent Health are happy to review pre-submission inquiries, but this isn't going to be true for all editors. But our amazing journal office is happy to answer any sort of technical questions regarding the submissions process, formatting, and those types of details. Pre-submission inquiries should always include, if possible, a draft manuscript, but at least should have an abstract so that editors can assess it. And if a manuscript is already ready, it might save time just to directly submit it to the journal of interest. I also just wanted to make a small point about the difference between scope and fit. So as Vanya described, the scope of the journal is all the different disciplines and topics that they publish on, but fit is based on whether editors can prioritize that study, and it's based on things like study size or the study population and the level of evidence, among other things. And we also always consider what else is in our pipeline. So other papers that we have under review and in revision, and also that have been accepted. So when we consider a paper for peer review, it's always in comparison with other submissions. So this is when we might talk to our colleagues about a paper, and I think we're going to talk about that in a moment.
Many thanks, Ali, and thanks, Vanya, for giving us an insight as to what authors should think about when they're choosing where to submit. Moving on to the internal review process. Ali, I wonder if you can talk us through how We've talked about collaboration, but how you collaborate internally across journals, what does it mean in practice, and why is this important to our authors?
Thanks, Kathy. That's a really important part of how we work at the Lancet Group, is collaborating with other editors, especially on oncology papers, because as Vanya said, there's so many journals that publish oncology research. I'd say there's 3 regular opportunities when editors discuss submissions with editors outside their own journals. It's generally really informal and happens naturally as part of our day-to-day work. And we do it because we're interested in understanding more about the papers and also about finding the best home. So the first opportunity is at pre-submission, when authors are looking to see whether the manuscript is a good fit. If the first editor feels that the paper is just not a priority for the journal, there's often an email discussion to see if another editor at the Lancet Group is interested in that paper. And you might receive an email back explaining this, that the paper wasn't a priority for the first journal you were interested in, but that editors at a second journal would be interested in discussing further or even seeing a full submission. And I just wanted to give a quick example of this. So very recently, I had a discussion with the editor-in-chief, Emma Granger, at the Lancet Respiratory Medicine about a paper that just wasn't a good fit for them. And at first, I wasn't interested. I felt it was too small, among a few other issues. But Emma described how the sample size was quite good for this particular population, gave me a little bit of background information. And in fact, our discussion changed my mind and I encouraged a full submission. So the discussions are really useful. The second opportunity is at full submission. In our manuscript system, we receive a lot of submissions and not all of them are going to be suitable for our journals, even if they're great science. So this is an opportunity to share papers across the group that might be a better fit. And the third is after peer review or after revision. And these can be much deeper conversations. They can happen over email or at a manuscript meeting, which my colleague Thaisa is going to speak about. And if we're very lucky, they happen in person at the office. And these discussions often look really carefully at reviewer remarks, both to the editor and the author, and they scrutinize different aspects of how the study was done, reported. And this has a double intention, both to improve the paper, but also to identify the best home if it's deemed unsuitable for that original journal that it was submitted to.
Thanks, Ali. You've given us some great examples there of how we really collaborate with each of the submissions that we get at the Lancet Group to kind of discuss them internally. Thaisa, I wonder if there's anything that you'd like to add to that from your perspective.
Yes, in fact, Ali, I was just going to share that this morning I also had an email exchange with someone from Lancet Oncology about a pre-sub, and it wasn't a good fit for them as well. But the population and the topic was very interesting for the US, so I offered them Regional Health Americas as a possible home for this pre-sub. And well, now we have 2 illustrations of how important it is, our internal communication and the fact that I would say that it's a vital part of the Lancet Group, and that's how we ensure that we have high quality and constructive feedback to give to the authors as well, and to help the research and not only find a home, but improve, because that's the whole outcome you can take from the peer review process, is to improve the paper. And so this process for us is very related to the manuscript meetings, as Ali mentioned. That's when all the editors get together to look at the review submissions and the ones that are already under revision. And even though not every paper will be presented at a meeting, all editors actively participate and can input on the manuscripts. And that acts as an extra set of peer reviews. And it brings a diversity setting of scientific expertise and regional insights that we also have at our group. So this teamwork actually works really well to give better feedback to the author and help them understand the strengths and improve areas of their manuscripts. And there's a huge value of having these editors from different backgrounds and with regional expertise as well. We can highlight novel angles, contextual factors, implications that might not be immediately relevant or apparent to everyone else. And so, for example, if an editor is familiar with the healthcare policies at a specific region, it can advise internally and help the editor of that's handling that paper to understand the direct impact or the importance of that research question at local stage. And it can also help the editor, the author, when a feedback and help them tailor that message in a way that will be much more impactful for policymakers to understand what's actually relevant of what they're finding. So this collaboration that we have is it's what sets us unique to give this richer feedback to the authors, and also ensure that they understand that we are not taking lightly any manuscript, and we're putting a lot of internal effort into providing the best feedback and helping them improve the paper to the maximum that we can.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Ali and Thaisa, for giving such a deep overview of how we really work together to collaborate over submissions we get to the Lancet Group. I'm going to move on now to looking more closely at our article transfer service. And I wonder, back to you, Vanya, could you tell us a bit more about how the article transfer service works in practice? We had a slide on it earlier, but perhaps you could take a deeper dive into what we call internally the ATS, but the article transfer service.
Thanks, Cassie. Sure. So, as we said earlier, maybe sometimes your article might be, has been assessed at the journal that you submitted it to, but we felt it wasn't the right fit for that journal because it's out of scope, or we didn't think it was the right audience. So we, as Thais and Ali mentioned, we editors are regularly in contact with one another, and it's not just for the webinars. We do sit at meetings very regularly, every week, and even those papers that didn't get a chance to be discussed at the meeting, though we have discussion platforms online internally where we can discuss articles, and editors from various journals can simultaneously look at an article that is being offered for transfer. So often, if I assess papers that come in for the weekly journal, and after our assessment, we decide that paper is not, we can't prioritize it for consideration. We will offer it to any of the journals in the Lancet Group for consideration. And if more than one journal is interested, shows interest in considering that study, we then let authors know of all the journals that are available to take on your manuscript for consideration and give you the option which one. And this process can happen before peer review. So at the immediate, what we call our first read. It can happen after we actually sent we thought could be of interest, and we gave it a chance, sent it out for views. Reviews came back, and based on the editorial assessment and reviews comments, we couldn't prioritize it. That's another opportunity for transfer. But sometimes we take even longer to understand whether it's a right fit or not, and might be only after first revision that we will be rejecting the paper from the original journal where it got submitted, and we open up the conversation with the editors across the group to transfer it. And the actual transfer, it's really just, we ask you on the letter, reject letter, if you are interested in transferring, and it's just, you just need to click a button. So we do need your input. We would not be transferring a paper without your agreement. If you agree to the transfer, it's very straightforward and comfortable, easy for both sides, for both editors and authors. Maybe I think perhaps Julie might have some other comments to add.
Sure. I think we've covered quite a lot already, but I just want to add a couple of points. So it's really important to emphasize that no transfer happens without the author's input. Their authors are always consulted and must agree before the manuscript is moved from one journal to another. And we provide all the relevant information so authors can make an informed decision. It's very streamlined. If the author agrees, like Vanya said, the manuscript and all of the reviews, that if the paper was reviewed are also transferred, and this also can save time as well. So overall, our goal is really to keep the process transparent and collaborative, and ensuring that authors have control and that their work reaches the right audience. There are more than 20 or over 20 journals in the Lancet Group that publish cancer-related research, all the way from basic and translational science to specialized clinical areas like public health and global health. So together, the Lancet family really provides a very strong and unique publishing environment with multiple options for publishing in oncology. That's all I want to say on that one, but I think we're ready for the next question.
Fantastic. Thank you, Julie, and thanks, Vanya, for taking us through the article transfer service. So then thinking about how people should prepare their manuscript. I'm going to go back to you, Julie. For oncology researchers considering submission, what's one tip you'd give them to help optimize their manuscript, not just for publication, but also for impact?
Yeah, so I have a lot of tips, so it might be tricky to keep it just to one, but I'll try to summarize with one at the end. So it really starts with a well-crafted cover letter. So the cover letter is your first and a very strong opportunity for you to briefly introduce your work and to provide for the editors the context of the work, and then also to explain why this work is exciting and why we should publish it. In a well-crafted cover letter, I recommend that you include sort of a brief context, what has been done in the field already, and what is the unmet need that it's being presented here in this study. A concise summary, very concise, 2 to 3 sentences is fine, just to kind of really recap what the main findings of the work are, how the work fits within the journal, explain why you chose this particular journal and how this aligns with the journal scope and the audience. In the cover letter, it's also a good idea, it's not required, but it's a good idea to just kind of mention the ethical statements, confirm what the work is original, and that it's not been published elsewhere, and that all authors have approved the submission. And especially for clinical studies, the trial registration, patient consent, these kinds of ethical considerations might be good to highlight in your cover letter. We also recommend letting us know if a work is going to be presented at a conference. That helps us to get a sense of the timelines. Overall, sorry, just one more thing, optional as well, is if you want to recommend particular experts in the field who might be willing to look at your work or might be good, have good expertise, you're free to recommend. It's also a good space if you want to exclude certain reviewers for conflict of interest. But overall, I know that's a lot that we've mentioned, but overall, it's really just to keep it brief, and usually one page is sufficient, but a well-crafted cover letter helps the editors understand quickly the value of your manuscript and why it deserves consideration. Another important section, before we get into the main paper, another important section is the research in context section. And this section really gives you the space to describe to your readers where the field stands and what new insights are provided here, and then the broader implications of the work. All right, so cover letter and research in context. I know those are a lot of tips, but I just want to conclude with maybe just one tip is really just try to keep it clear on what the exciting thing is and how it fits into the broader context of the field, if I had to narrow it down to one. All right, over to you, Vanya, for the main manuscript.
Thanks, Julie. Exactly, as Julie's saying, I think throughout the manuscript or from submission, from the assessment of editors and then reviewers, it's very important, the context. It's so important that even when you get to the introduction and discussion, it's important that you convey how your research addressed an unmet need in oncology, because we want reviewers, editors, readers, we want to see the bigger picture. And it's very easy for researchers, and many of us, if not all of us, have also been researchers before we were editors. And I remember how easy it is that we get tempted to go down our own rabbit hole, and we forget the bigger picture. We forget why is this important in comparison to what's out there in the literature. See, throughout the manuscript, also very helpful that you keep the clarity and structure. And I find it very helpful to ask, if you have the opportunity to ask a colleague outside your work to take a look at it, because to make sure the language you use is actually familiar to anyone that will be reading it. Make sure you have a logical and organization, concise language. It's well labeled, figures, all nicely signposted. And we really appreciate complex data is might be difficult to explain in simple words, but that's always what we're aiming for. And you will have our support if paper is accepted to further edit and increase the clarity of the manuscript. But when you submit, that's really important. That helps our assessment and the reviewer's assessment as well. So when you write, important to write with the general reader in mind. In terms of methods and data, the results, we will always want to see enough information for someone else to reproduce it. So this is quite important, and we want to see the code for your modeling study. If you have a modeling study, if you have databases that you've generated data, we want to see your declaration on sharing data. So when you get to the results, it's important that your conclusions are supported by the data you've presented. It wouldn't be appropriate to discuss data that is not included in the manuscript, unless you're referring to a different study. That's fine. Finally, I'm just going to mention the title and abstract, which actually is the first thing also the readers will come across. And these are often the main parts that readers see. The title, the abstract, and the research in context that Julie has already mentioned. So you make sure that's informative, compelling, clear, and it should be written in a more non-specialist, for more non-specialists to understand. So yeah, I hope this didn't sound too complex. And again, we always available to help throughout the process as well.
Thank you so much, Vanya and Julie. So many great tips there on what you're looking for as somebody's preparing their manuscript for submission. In fact, Julie touched on this about mentioning about flagging if it's likely that the research is going to be presented at a conference. So the next question, which I'll send to Ali's way, is if an author is planning to present their research at a conference, how can the Lancet Group support them?
Thanks, Kathy. I think this is an exciting question because a lot of journals might have the capacity to offer a co-publication with an oral presentation at a conference. So the key, as Julie said, is to let us know as early as possible if you have an oral presentation at a conference coming up that's going to present the work that you've just submitted. We need to know the time and the date of that presentation if we're going to be able to make any sort of assessment of whether it's feasible for us to try to time publication if your paper is accepted with that oral presentation. So the key is to put that in the cover letter, or even to email the editor separately to let us know about it. I know the Lancet and the Lancet Oncology have a long history of doing these types of co-publications, but many other specialty journals would consider it. If a paper is going to be presented at a conference, but it doesn't quite make it to publication, perhaps because the conference was just too close to when the paper was submitted, there are options that if it's accepted by the time of the presentation, you can say that the paper is in press. So that's sort of a second option. If a paper is going to be presented at a conference and it's transferred to another journal at the Lancet Group, then, as Julie said, all of those peer review comments will get transferred as well, and all of your cover letter information will get transferred so that there's a clear sort of continuity there. But you should make sure to discuss with the editor of the new journal whether the timed publication is still possible. I should note that if we publish your research simultaneously with a conference presentation, then it can be considered for inclusion in our conference pages on the Lancet.com, as well as in Lancet conference alerts, which are sent to coincide with conferences where content that we're publishing is being presented. And we can also support with social media promotion. There's another aspect of conference presentations and co-publications that's important, which is that sometimes a submission will come in very close to a conference presentation, and some journals offer a fast track option. So at the Lancet Weekly, research papers, usually randomized controlled trials, if they're judged eligible for fast track, they can be peer reviewed within 72 hours. And then if accepted, published within 4 weeks of submission. So that's pretty tight if you've got a great paper that you're presenting at a conference. And it selects specialty journals that offer fast track. If your paper is judged eligible, then it can be published within 10 weeks of submission if it succeeds at peer review. But of course, fast track papers are subjected to the same Lancet Group rigorous standards as all other papers. It has external and statistical peer review and edited by experienced editors to the highest standards. So there's no sneaky way through. It's just expedited. And I just wanted to emphasize that you are welcome to share results pre-publication at scientific conferences for the development of medical guidelines and things like that, that you own the data. It's just important to note that if your paper is under consideration at a Lancet journal, or probably any journal really, you can say that the paper is under review or in revision, but you must not mention the name of the journal. That breaks confidentiality.
Fantastic. Thanks, Ali. That's a really great overview of how we can support authors with their research presented at conferences and how the flow of that works. And thanks to everybody. I think now we are going to throw the floor open to questions from our audience. So I'm just looking here. Thanks everybody for sending your questions in. This is going to be the last part of the presentation, so do keep those questions coming. And I'm going to start here with a really great question about regional context. So regional context can be crucial in oncology research. How do the Lancet regional health journals provide a platform for research that may be underrepresented in global literature? Maybe Thaisa, that's one for you.
Yeah, that's for me, and that's actually a really good question. The heading of the question is perfect. It is indeed crucial for oncology research and honestly any research to understand the context behind it, and that's not only because of barriers as we usually think of, but understanding healthcare systems, the patient population, the disease pattern, the treatment response, all of this can change depending on regional situations or even within the same country. So the idea behind the Lancet Regional Health titles is exactly that, to understand the research within these regional nuances that might be overlooked or underrepresented, and if we're always looking for research that is generalizable. So here we're not looking for research that's generalizable, but we're looking at the research that has the highest quality of evidence that can inform local policymakers and inform policies directly on that context. So that might be because this is tailored to the unique healthcare infrastructure at the local, or genetic factor or cultural considerations of that population. And that pertains to not only looking at the regional epidemiology, but actually relevant local considerations as well. And the idea is to enable those researchers to share those findings that are relevant to policymakers and the patient community as well, and directly impact policy changes and clinical changes as at a local level. What I also like to highlight about the regional health titles is that sometimes you might look at this as a regionally focused journal, but I want to shift this perception and actually share that the way that we see those journals is quite the opposite. So what we are doing is creating an international audience that can now understand the contextualized research and take this to the next step of the research and consider that one piece of information that's locally important.
Fantastic. Thank you, Taysa. Moving on to a completely different topic. I see the next question. Great question. Are preprints allowed? And if so, what are the options at the Lancet Group? Vanya, would you like to take that one?
Sure, thanks, Kathy. Yes, that's right. It is. We do allow preprints at the Lancet. So when you submit a paper to any of the journals at the Lancet Group, you will see a little box in your submission form that you would need to tick if you're interested in having your paper uploaded in our preprint server. So what's important here is any paper is eligible for being uploaded, but we only upload if you would like us to do so. And often authors don't realize they tick the box inadvertently, and then suddenly you see your paper has been shared with the community. We can take it down if you see it was a mistake, but yeah, it's something to look out for. Another important note is we can only upload the original version of the submitted manuscript. So if later down the line your paper has now been revised and you want to hurry, you would like to have your paper ready for publication to coincide with a specific World Day or meeting, etc., and we were not able to meet that date, at that stage you cannot upload the paper on the preprinter server. The preprinter server is only to share the original manuscript that was submitted to the journal. If later the paper happens to be rejected from one of the Lancet journals, it can still be shared. It will still stay in the server, no problem. But I think, yeah, these are all the different situations around the paper shared on our preprinter server. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks, Vanya. Moving on, we've got a great question from Safak in the Q&A. Is it possible to join or be in the future selected as a reviewer? Ali, do you want to take that one?
Sure, thanks, Kathy. So the way that we look for reviewers is mostly by identifying experts through their publications. And of course, we want the absolute top experts to be reviewing our papers, although we're also interested in ensuring that we have a very diverse group of reviewers for papers. So we're looking for reviewers from all over the world. So we do need help in identifying reviewers in some places where research isn't as a big an enterprise as it is, for example, in the United States or Europe. And we are also looking for, of course, gender diversity, race and ethnicity diversity, and career stage diversity. So I know sometimes it's difficult to get into peer review when you're an early career researcher, but we really do value those individuals' opinions and perspectives. So the way to highlight yourself as a reviewer, probably, the best way is just to ensure that you have a wide and deep body of work in your area of expertise. But of course, that takes many years. We might not find you very easily on the internet. So if you'd like to highlight yourselves to us, then you just need to email the editor-in-chief of the journal that you're interested in reviewing for. And that sort of lets us know, makes us aware of you. And if we have a paper that your expertise is suitable for, then we will consider using you as a reviewer.
Lovely. Thanks, Ali. I see we've got a question from Nigel, a general question. He asks, is it a prerequisite that the authors must be linked with a recognised university or institution? Could a clinician submit a journal to a journal independently? Who'd like to take that one?
I can take it.
Thanks,
Sure,
Julie.
you can definitely submit on your own. We, in fact, sometimes we have single author papers. It happens. You don't have to be aligned with a university.
Lovely, thanks, Julie.
Mm-hmm.
A great question here. Could you comment about politics and ethics surrounding AI tools? Julie, do you want to take that one?
Sure. So AI is just on everyone's mind. It's very powerful, and it's evolving breakneck speed. And as publishers, we're trying to evolve with it and come up with best practices. And we do have a document on the Lancet website, I believe. I don't know if we have that linked here. But as far as the ethics, really, I think the main thing is that, when we're talking about generative AI in particular, I mean, we have machine learning papers, that's a separate AI issue. But for generative AI, I think that's where the ethics really starts to come into play. And it's important to note that we don't allow authors to use generative AI to generate scientific comment or text or data. So it's really important that you use generative AI, things like ChatGPT and these kinds of things, just to polish the grammar or these kinds of things. We allow that, but even so, it has to be declared by the author, and we have very specific guidelines on that as well. So bottom line is it's a very powerful and time-saving tool, but it's important that the scientific language is your own, the scientific ideas are your own, and that generative AI is only used as a means of polishing or grammar, and then even so it has to be declared, and the authors must be are ultimately responsible for that content.
Thanks, Julie. That's such an important topic at the moment, and a great overview of our approach there, and direct people to the guidelines to look at our guidelines on this topic, I think. So moving on, great question here. Will a phase 1 or 2 study with huge potential of treatment paradigm shift, similar phase 3 trial ongoing and will be released a couple of years later, be considered in the Lancet? Who would like to take that question?
I'm happy to take it, Kathy. I don't know if the author is asking about the Lancet Group or the Lancet Weekly, but certainly we'll have a home for a paper like this. I mean, if we're talking about the Lancet Weekly, it's very difficult to answer without having seen the exact, what study we're talking about, what's the context. Again, we need to know the context. We need to understand why is it important, how does that address an unmet need, etc. But again, as Ali mentioned earlier, if you are unsure and you want to discuss with us, drop us a line through our editorial inbox. It's one of whichever journal, or the journal office also has an email address available on our website, and we'll do our best to answer. So feel free to get in touch.
Thanks, Vanya. Moving on to the next question from Anna. How should we proceed with a position paper, a paper which is meant to represent an author or a group of authors' opinion regarding a certain topic? Should the author contact the editor first to check suitability? And Thaisa, would you like to take that one?
Yes, I can take that one. So there are two possibilities for this question. I don't know exactly what the person meant, but if it's a position paper in a way that it's a group of people that got together and collectively decided on putting up what we call position paper, the different journals will have different rules for considering or not, even within the Lancet Group position papers, and what the format that they will suggest for you to put it. So my advice would be, as you said, contact the editor-in-chief of the journal that you're most interested in, and explain the paper and the focus. And again, as Benny reinforced, what does it brings as a message, and where it sits within the needs. But if you're meaning a paper that's certain people's views on how something's done, we have a section that we call viewpoint, which could be what you're describing, which is your views on a certain thing, and defending a point of view regarding something. And yeah, that most of our journals consider viewpoints as one type of research. But it's always great for papers that you're not absolutely sure where they fit or what's the actual interest. I would always go to the editor and drop a message with a clear cut explaining what you mean, and we're very, very open to respond to you as fast as we can.
Thanks, Thaisa. Barry, I think is a question here that's probably related. May I ask how to publish a viewpoint paper? Or is it usually not considered? I think that links to your previous answer quite closely. I think one of the themes from this Q&A is that don't ever hesitate to contact one of us if you have an idea for a paper or you're wanting to know something about the submission process. Thaisa, is there anything you wanted to add there, particularly about a viewpoint paper?
And just that if you are already sure that what you are considering is a viewpoint, you can just check the information for authors and go ahead with the submission. And just if you're unsure, then you drop us an email. We don't want to delay your submission as well. And so if you're ready, and the viewpoint is listed as one of the types of papers that specific journal considers in their information for authors, then go for it.
Fantastic, thank you. Now, here's a question from Philip. The possibilities for research and data presentation, the fit, also depend to a great deal on local factors and financial resources. Do you have any recommendations for presenting a paper as effectively as possible? I think we've touched a little bit on this in the panel discussions, but would anybody like to take this one on? Do you have any recommendations for presenting a paper as effectively as possible?
I'm happy to take this one, Kathy, and maybe I can be backed up by my colleagues as well. I think what this question asker is asking is about if you have limited resources or maybe limited expertise, or limited access to fancy software, how can we make sure that our paper is presented in the best possible way? And I think that what applies here is KISS, keep it simple, stupid, but I'll take out the stupid, just keep it simple. So, Excel is a perfectly good way of generating figures, charts and graphs, and making sure that your writing is clear and concise. Those are the best ways to get your message across. It doesn't require fancy figures or even fancy writing. We have plenty of manuscripts that are submitted from all over the world, from people where English is not their first language, and that's perfectly acceptable. We are happy to take a little bit of extra time to make sure that we understand the paper, but it's really about making sure that, and I think I'm reiterating what my colleagues have said, that it's clear the purpose of your paper, the novelty of it, how it meets an unmet need, where it sits in the context of the literature, and has nice, clear figures that are really easy to understand, or clear tables that are easy to understand. Those are the crucial aspects.
Thanks, Ali. Next question from Anne. How can one be involved as part of a Lancet commission? Who would like to take that question?
I'm happy to
Vanya.
take that question. I mean, we have various commissions in ongoing, some that are in the pipeline, some that have been published, and they can come to us as proposals, or sometimes we come up with an idea and we propose that idea to some experts to go and develop the idea with us. Now, if you're interested in a topic of either an ongoing commission or a past commission, often commissions have what we call the afterlife. Actually, we hope the commission won't sit on shelves, and there's always work to be done after the commission finish. Oftentimes, all the working groups involved in the commission work are very much happy to hear about interests of colleagues that have, that are well positioned to contribute in a way that to add to what they have been working on. And if that's the case, do drop us a line again via our editorial inbox and let us know. It might be that that commission group is still actively seeking for people. It might be that maybe next opportunity we covering that topic, we might reach out and ask you if you're still interested, if still available, and the project is starting. So it really varies. But if you register your interest, we'll see how we can go from there, and we'll know you on that side.
Perfect. Thanks ever so much, Vanya. I'm conscious of time. I'm going to see if we can have a last couple of questions. Perhaps this might be a quick one. Do we have a Lancet publication for geriatric oncology in the portfolio? Who would like to answer that one? Vanya, I see you're nodding your head. What would be the best route for a geriatric oncology paper?
I would say the Lancet Healthy Longevity. They cover a lot of geriatric oncology.
Fantastic. Perhaps another more detailed question. Does the Lancet consider publishing multi-center retrospective clinical studies? What are the key aspects the editorial team would prioritize during the evaluation of such a paper, e.g. methodological rigor, clinical relevance, novelty, or others? Who would like to take that one? Is that another?
I can start and everyone can jump in, but I think we'll all agree that it's a combination of all of the points you mentioned. And if you have one without the others, especially methodological rigor, I would say it's complicated, but we're always looking at, is it fixable or is it a fatal problem? So I would say it's a combination of all. I don't know if my colleagues have something else.
I think that's a good summary. Shall I move on to perhaps, I see we're nearly to time, one last quick question. What level of feedback can we expect from the editors after we've submitted a paper? Who'd like to take that one?
I can go, and please, my colleagues can chip in. It really depends. If the paper is being considered for a peer review, or if we submitted the paper to one of the journals, to a journal that could not prioritize your paper, if we were not able to send your paper out for peer review, the feedback is going to be short, and we will explain perhaps very shortly that didn't fit, was out of scope, something very general. If the paper was sent out for peer review, you will have a lot of feedback from editors and reviewers. So it really depends on the circumstance of your paper.
Fantastic. Thank you, Vanya. So I think we're actually at the end now, or up to time. thank you ever so much to all the editors for your great insights for the last hour. I'd like to wrap up now by thanking all of our audience for taking the time to attend this webinar. Thanks again to the editors for sharing your experience with our audience, and thank you, audience, for all of these great questions. If anybody has any further queries, please do visit our website, where you'll be able to find the information you need to submit your oncology research to our fabulous family of journals. And then my last comment, at the end of today's webinar, I mentioned at the beginning, it would be great if you could take part in our 30-second survey, as your feedback is really valuable to us and really helps us kind of shape these webinars moving forwards. So with that, I'll bid you goodbye. Thanks everybody for taking part, and we look forward to receiving your research. Thanks everyone. Bye-bye.